Kipple eyes.
Planeswalkers. Beings able to travel at will through the realms of existence. When you sit down at the table to play Magic the Gathering, you and your opponents become Planeswalkers, bending the ebb and flow of life to your will. The flourishing of nature, the harshest elements, and all that stuff that the height of the 1990s, Satanic Panic, thought meant you were literally signing a pact with, Boris Devilboom. Yeah, look at this guy, he's bad news.
Give me your bones. I want your bones.
In short, Planeswalkers are super wizards. You're a Planeswalker. This technique of planeswalking also conveniently allows adventurers to span wildly different settings to maximize cool storytelling, set flavor, and design space. If you don't care about regular old fantasy wizards, first of all, you monster. Second, we got steampunk wizards in Kaladesh, we got Viking wizards in Kaldheim, dinosaurs versus merfolk versus pirates versus vampire conquistadors in Ixalan. There's countless flavors of magic to jump into, and you can dedicate your experience to just a few specially themed sets and have a great time, or mix and match from a wide breadth of themes and worlds to, say, play every crab card ever printed. That's a bad example. Point is, if you want to find something uniquely yours, there's something you'll find to love in Magic the Gathering. Since its alpha set release in August of 1993, Magic continues to captivate players almost 30 years later. And how? It's because Magic has something for everyone. Magic is competitive, full of strategy to learn, build, adapt, and play out your game plan, getting a little better with each game. It's flavorful with a history of worlds, stories, and characters to learn about and get invested in, and the best part, actually play them in your decks. It's quite contemplative, too. A lot of my time spent with Magic isn't even at a table playing with others, it's peaceful time organizing cards on my own, discovering neat tools and combos for existing decks from the deck lists of others. It can be looking over new sets after taking a break from the game, or just thinking about new ideas, whether I build them or not. Just the theory crafting in Magic can be entertaining. Occasionally you may read a piece of flavor text that's somehow profound, that makes a lasting impact on you. Those cards are the best finds. Who cares if they're competitively viable? I keep 2 cards, Reign of Revelation and Imposter of the Sixth Pride, in special spots of my collection, because their messages just resonate with me. I'll read these out for you real quick. For Reign of Revelation, as the sky opened up, we ran for shelter. Halfway there, I came to the sudden realization that, already soaked, there might be more to gain from experiencing the rain than running from it. An Imposter of the Sixth Pride, the tribe was as strong as his longing, their territory as vast as his isolation. The changeling knew he had found a home and a form. Sometimes Magic can teach you a little about yourself, or something you can take with you in life, and that's pretty great too. After so many years, it's still possible to form and grow friendships around this game with considerable ease. Some of my later college years I got to make new acquaintances solely because I was getting into the game at the time. Even if all that doesn't matter to you, if you're some kind of stock market trend lizard person, Magic is basically, maybe unfortunately, its own stock market, so go nuts. That won't backfire and ruin the game for new players or anything. But there it is. People come to this game from so many different backgrounds, and it provides something for everyone in a very literal sense. It's really no surprise that it's continued to this day to have the reputation and community that it does. Blessed vs. Cursed was the first set of Magic cards I ever owned, sent to me by my brother as a birthday gift in 2016. Angels and demons clashing on the plane of Innistrad alongside spirits, werewolves, undead, and a touch of cosmic evil from beyond dimensions, the Eldrazi. It was gothic and cosmic horror galore. Jay and I had been in love with the setting since Bloodborne, and Blessed vs. Cursed was a perfect gift for this reason. The art and setting of the plane of Innistrad so richly shared the same stuff that made Bloodborne darkly beautiful, majestic, and terrifying. And this became my spark, an awakening to a plethora of worlds seen through the tiny windows of thousands of cards. That's where Magic really began for me. The latest set, Midnight Hunt, is returning to the plane once again, so if you're a horror fan, this might be the perfect time to test out learning the game and seeing if it clicks. At worst, you'll have some cool art. At best, you'll have a new hobby. At the best's worst, that new hobby may try to eat your wallet. Probably some 20 years ago, I had been peeping through my brother's DVD and bookshelves out of curiosity when I saw his Magic collection. It immediately drew me in, that logo like an ancient tome, 5 colored orbs for each color of mana arranged at the center, magic emblazoned across the top in arcane, flowing blue lettering. This was something cool, I knew it. I picked up a few cards and this is Atog, one of the first Magic cards I ever set my eyes on, and the one I remember most distinctly, along with the melty-faced abomination. The old spooky Magic art double whammy. Somehow, though, Atog stuck with me more. Those yellow-orange eyes bulging from his alien-like body, the pointed, toothy grin intimidatingly long and eager. Though if I read the card, I'd realize he's just here to eat artifacts, not curious kids. Atog made such a piercing, eerie impression on me that I put the cards back right at that moment, and I didn't explore it any further, and for years, that was my one and only Magic experience. These days, Atog and I are chill, though. What's up, man?
Oh yeah, sup?
I'd always been a little leery of trading card games. So many confusing rules, so many years of cards it's nigh impossible to have complete knowledge of them, and maybe worst of all, the asking price of entry. I had a couple packs worth of Pokemon cards as a kid, a starter deck of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I was just there for the novelty and because I watched the shows.
True back in the pool!
I never really played any of those games. I still don't know how to play Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, if I'm being honest. Mainly, I just liked the feeling of cracking a new pack of cards, looking at the art, picking my favorites, and that was the end of it. I never fully appreciated trading card games for the game part. For me, the neat creatures and nice artwork was the whole appeal. When Jay gifted me those dual decks, I didn't have friends to play Magic with, so as before, a lot of the appeal for me was the art and world building. The difference was, it got me motivated. I started to learn how to play the game properly. It inspired me to find more things to love about Magic, searching themes and creature types I thought were cool to build my own decks around. Eventually, I started frequenting a local game store to meet other players, learning the less obvious rules and new playstyles while I read the stories of characters I would come to love, like Karn's Silver Golem or Slimefoot the Stowaway. I want to look back on my journey since then, the gods of Amonkhet, the infamous artifice and biomechanical beings of Mirrodin, the returning legends, legacies, and lichen of Dominaria. I want to share with you how my love for Magic has grown over the years, and try to speak from what experience I can muster to help find a foothold into this wonderful game, and help you avoid some of the pitfalls and awkwardness if you decide this sounds like an adventure you'd like to try out as well. By its legacy alone, Magic makes an intimidating early impression. The reality I remember from being a new player was losing a lot to better decks and better players, building a lot of jank, playing a lot of cards that didn't work the way I thought they did, and no lie, it was disheartening. You'll play people who have been playing for years with knowledge and collections built up and value well over your own. I definitely faced my share of feeling dumb or embarrassed going to constructed events. I don't blame new players for shying away from playing outside of kitchen table Magic with friends they already know. And if you have those friends, that's amazing, and you cherish them. Sharing skill levels can make deck building more fun because you can learn and improve alongside one another. In the end though, most players I've met out in the wild have been mostly pretty chill people, and the best way to make Magic friends, if you lack them like I did at first, is to put yourself out there and just be kind. Most folks are here to have a good time. You like to hope. While I'm going to talk primarily about Commander, since it's my game mode of choice, just know there's a bevy of formats and ways to play. Most formats play Magic 1v1, where each player starts with 20 life and builds a 60 card deck with up to 4 copies of any card that isn't a basic land. As far as lands, they're Magic's main resource to create mana which let you cast cards. That's how you pay for these guys. On average, in a 60 card deck, you'd run around 24-ish. Depends on what your deck is doing, and if it has other ways of making mana, but that's kind of the standard. Commander, meanwhile, is a multiplayer format for as few as 2 to as many as, well, there's not a hard limit, but try to cap it around 5 if you've got places to be a few hours from now. Everyone starts with 40 life and runs 100 card decks led by one commander, separated from the deck and always castable from its own designated zone. A commander can be any creature labeled legendary in its type line. Sometimes planeswalkers can be commanders, or 2 commanders can lead the deck together as partners, if the card indicates such. Your decks can only include the colors in your commander's color identities, so a red and blue commander can only have red and blue cards in it. Pretty self-explanatory for the most part. Commander is a singleton format, which means you can only run 1 copy of any given card. Though if 2 differently named cards function identically, that's actually still fair game, and you can include both. This encourages finding new cards with similar effects, which makes Commander appealing for new players, since you don't need to buy a set of 4 for every card. What's nice about Commander is it's generally much more flexible for playstyles and skill levels, and really can just be a fun way to hang out, socialize, and pass the time with each other. Unlike rotating formats like Standard, you can play any card from any set in Magic's history, excluding joke cards, unless you ask nicely and they're really funny, and excessively powerful or expensive ones found on the format's smallish ban list. Even then, house rules win out over anything else, unless you're at some official event, so just run what's fun for you, but respect others and let them know if you're running something a little wonky. Having an idea of one another's decks helps prevent feel-bad game dynamics, and is just good manners.
Yo, you wanna learn how to do infinite?
Magic is a super broken game, and I mean broken in a weirdly controlled way. The game regularly converses with players not through the text on its cards, but the words between the lines. That's where the real opportunities are found. Clever exceptions to reap all the benefits and turn drawbacks into advantages. It just takes the right deck, or combination of cards. Even within a single set, infinite loops and game-winning combos aren't just possible, they're some of the best strategies if you can pull them off. Delina Wildmage and Pixie Guide, for example, from the recent Dungeons & Dragons set, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. In this case, if you nail the first few dice rolls, it quickly becomes a guaranteed flood of infinite token copies.
Light punch, medium punch, light kick, heavy punch. Oh, how's it taste? Keep the rhythm up.
If Magic the Gathering was a fighting game, it would be Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Years worth of characters, playstyles, and personality, some not even close to gameplay balanced or thematically tied to one another. When you've played long enough, finding new card combos or ways to exploit seemingly average cards can become one of the game's lasting appeals. It's also why if you ever play a format like Modern or Vintage with large card pools, most of the people you play are guaranteed to hit you with some game-ending combo on like turn 3 or 4.
Now shut the f up and learn some combos.
If you're just starting out and want a low-commitment way to learn the game, Magic Arena is almost certainly the easiest and cheapest option to date, because it's free. It does an alright job introducing you to the game's basics with its tutorials, demonstrating the flow of gameplay and focus of each color, with cards running as far back as 2016's Kaladesh block, and some specially curated historic cards from earlier in the game's history. There's a decent card pool to build all kinds of fun stuff, with enough free events, daily rewards, and such to slowly build a deck without needing to dump money into it. While you can't buy singles, you do earn wild cards, which can create any card in a given rarity, and making a mythic rare that would be $20 in paper with a wild card you earn for free is satisfying in its own right. I don't out and out love this system, as building a specific deck you have in mind becomes a grind when you depend on the luck of the draw to pull the cards or wild cards you need, but it has its perks. Arena isn't fantastic, but I'm saying as an entry-level thing, it's probably one of the more accessible ways to just start playing and have a good time. There's also the older MTG Online, which I've never dabbled with, so I can't comment from direct experience, but if you don't mind a slightly aged UI, it's almost definitely the more flexible of the two, with a larger card pool and more format options, like Commander. While there's no Commander support in Arena right now, as it only handles 1v1 play, you might check out Brawl if all this Commander talk sounds interesting to you. It's a singleton format that lets you utilize Commanders in the same way, so you get the fun of building a deck around one spicy card, but if you ask me, the most fun comes from goofing around with a full table in person. The social element is really irreplaceable, and sadly you won't get that as much from Arena or online. More sadly, given the last year and a half,
Plop. Splish, splash.
I also haven't been playing in-person anything these days, so hey, Arena's good too.
Heck yeah.
So you're a Planeswalker. Before you jump into a table of your local meta-grizzled Magic players though, you'll want to have a deck to play with. Picking a deck and the spells to go in it is one of the most satisfying yet difficult parts of this game, the other being actually playing it. You may not even know what kind of deck you want to play early on, or what cards are worth running, so I'll tell you how I found my first commander, and we'll go from there. When everything is new and you feel directionless, buying packs is the easiest instant gratification way to find cards you like. And that's how it was for me. For a couple months, I was mostly obsessed with Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon. That gothic, cosmic horror hybrid just spoke to me, like I said earlier. I got some neat cards out of it and learned about Magic's Eldritch Cthulhu stand-ins, the Eldrazi, and I was off to the races. At least until I figured out how expensive the Eldrazi Titans were, and then I decided to widen my net a little further. Nothing quite clicked for me on the Commander front for some time. I was just building from what I had, coming up with ideas for decks, maybe trying them out once and getting thrashed at my locals, and yeah, that was Magic. Probably my favorite was this Atog Fling deck, where I would play a bunch of free or cheap artifacts, feed them to an Atog, and then just send this giant bloated Atog for 12 damage right to my opponent's face. And it didn't win me many games, but those turns that I did get it to go off were surprising for my opponents, and I really enjoyed that little victory, that little feeling of, yeah, I can do something with this. I was just building from what I had, which didn't get me too far in my local game store crowd. I needed something more cohesive, and that's when I found Oketra the True. The Egyptian mythos-themed set of Amonkhet was still newish at the time, so I bought some packs, not really worrying about what I pulled, just happy to see new art, new cards. In the rare slot of one pack, I pulled Oketra the True, standing virtuous and strong, the Amonkhet god of solidarity. She looked powerful and sounded cool as all get out in those early days. I don't care what anyone says, Oketra is still cool to me. Indestructible, formidable in combat with double strike, and her drawback of requiring 3 allied creatures before she'll raise her hand to aid your fight even felt on flavor. Building a deck around Oketra, you had to prove you can protect others, and that pretty much sealed my decision for my first commander deck. That was the first deck I would spend a year or so really improving, finding neat new cards and strategies to compete with my more seasoned friends. I learned about equipment and auras used to bolster your creatures and arm Oketra to deal lethal damage in a few swings. I learned about token generators, cards that put out 2 or 3 creatures at once to instantly get Oketra online.
Get off the table, Beth. Beth, stop.
I'd make little combos like Invincible Hymn and Storm Herd, don't play that combo. Or Solemnity and Force Bubble, do play that combo. It was fun just to see what was possible and make myself feel as invincible as Oketra herself. But then Oketra wasn't actually terribly powerful against the commanders my opponents played.
Beth, stop. You're going in the video now, Beth. Stop.
Mike, Praetor's Voice, Travis the Redeemed, Luke of Clan Neltoth. The people I learned to play against ran some scary decks. Oketra is a combat-centric commander, and universally they have trouble keeping pace in this multiplayer format. Prohibitively slow, swinging at only one player at a time, and hard to maintain, especially once board wipes and removal hit. That 3-creature drawback can be a glaring Achilles heel, and your opponents can exploit it totally by coincidence to stop another player from comboing out. Oketra's power and unity was a fun theme to build around, but far from competitive, and it rarely got off the ground for me. Still, it was my first deck, and I loved it enough to rebuild it from a deck list I had handy after losing it a few years ago. It's sentimental to me, and a meaningful part of my collection. In the end, that's what a Magic deck should be, something you can tell a story about, that you can express why you like to play it, what brought you to build it in the first place. Your commander may just be the first rare card you pulled, or a card a sibling gave to you. It could be from an online video showing you how cool a commander is. Really, it doesn't matter as long as you like it. If you want some more guidance, we're getting more pre-constructed commander decks sold now than ever before, with each set offering new and unique cards to build around. And oftentimes those decks, while a bit weak to start, will provide you valuable staples for the format. Soul Rings, Arcane Signets, and Command Towers are almost always solid includes, to help get some extra mana and keep up with your opponents. Over time, the way you approach the game will likely change as well. As fun as cracking packs can be, I don't recommend you do it long term to get your cards, because it's the equivalent of buying blind boxes looking for specific pulls. You'll just never get there without spending way too much money. If you have a card, or cards in particular you know you need, then it's time to get into the trading part of this trading card game. I mean, there's nothing wrong with buying a pack or two for fun every once in a while, just don't put yourself at the mercy of the RNG gods to make your decks. You can almost always find what you need on the secondary market. It's not always the case depending on the game store, but a good amount of them keep valuable cards in glass display cases for purchase. There's a wide selection of websites, many local, some more widespread, that buy and sell singles, and allow users to put their own cards up for sale. In its earliest form, you just traded with friends you knew who played. That's the whole trading card game moniker. But the more people played, the more reaching for the competitive edge pushed players to require running optimal cards. I think that's really what created the necessity of these venues to move cards around more easily. Today, the secondary market is a well-greased machine where you can get almost anything you need at the push of a button. Obviously, since there was money in supplying exactly what people wanted, the secondary market became what it is today. And what it is today is undeniably invaluable, but it's also a mess. You hate to deal with it, but you gotta live in the system if you want to play the game. Kinda like, that sounds really familiar.
The one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Valuable cards through factors of date of last reprint, play in competitive, rotating, and popular formats, whether it's shiny, if someone spilled their drink on it, and whether they were put on a reserved list of arbitrarily unreprintable cards more than a decade ago. Seriously, why does Karn have to be on here? Means you'll see $20 removal staples, $45 niche commanders, $250 dual lands, and buddy, you better believe even more egregiously expensive singular pieces of cardboard, because the value is dictated more by card misers than anyone interested in playing the game in those cases. Okay, I'll be fair, they probably like to play the game, but they probably like making money off of it too. Cards like those aren't for everyone anymore. There's pretty literally have and have not cards, and it sucks. In part, I want to say the cards that have been blown up in value partly did so because they don't fit the game's balance anymore. They're more rogue cards that rocked formats and drove up demand, or got banned because, like I said earlier, Magic is a game about breaking limits and finding loopholes. I'm not trying to say through any of this that valuable cards in the secondary market have no place in Magic. They absolutely do. I just think the parts of that market that create unaffordable cards, that are vital to play certain decks with, sours for people who enjoy the game part of the experience. Not being able to afford Karn, or not being able to play a token deck because Parallel Lives went from $10 to $50, like, that sucks. I'm sure the ones who enjoy the business part love it, but I don't think I have to explain that aspect. I own a lot of cards that have appreciated in value, but I like playing those cards more than their price tags. I feel bad for people who have to pay twice or 5 times the amount I did, because no singular card is worth that kind of moolah. Yes, you can talk about collectability and Black Lotuses, the Moxen, the Power 9 all day. Those have their place in the hobby, extremely sparingly so, but they qualify more as living legends now than actual playing cards by reputation alone. Cards like Doubling Season or Parallel Lives don't both need to be over $50 though, full stop. It's not all so bad in the long run, and not something that prevents you from playing and doing well. I'm highlighting cards that are worth a lot of money, but frankly, a lot of what your deck will be made up of are cards that are less than $1, and that's how most cards should be. The really good ones should be $5, maybe $10 at most, and that's kind of my cutoff point. Maybe that's excessively frugal, but bottom line, those $20 cards scare away new players, and people who can't afford to play those cards, so they just won't play them. It becomes a thing of have and have-nots, and I love this game, but I don't have to support that aspect of it. In most cases, if you see a card that's prohibitively expensive for you, there's usually a cheaper one somewhere in the game. Second Harvest or Parallel Evolution might do enough in a pinch if you can't get a Doubling Season or a Parallel Lives. In the case of Slimefoot, you could even go with workarounds like Illusionist Bracers, make double the Saprolings without actually having to have a token doubling effect. Ooh, now that's spicy. Sometimes Magic's about finding the best card for the job, grimacing, and finding the next 2 or 3 marginally worse, but still decent cards that do the next best thing. This is a fact of Magic. Building a solid budget commander deck is going to cost you probably $50 minimum. Maybe sometimes less, but that's an average. Even under $1 a piece, a 100-card deck doesn't build itself for cheap, and a really good commander deck can shoot past 100 easily. My advice is not to go in with the intent of building your fully optimized deck on day one. When you first build, find as many cheap things that synergize with what the deck is trying to do. Make that deck fun to play first, and then work on optimizing it. Taking out so-so cards for ones you know will help you make consistent plays and occasionally pull a win off, that's a great way to go about it. The nice thing about this game I haven't called enough attention to is that when you do build that deck, a not insignificant chunk of the potential deck list will be mercifully cheap and easy to afford. Just keep an eye on those big ones, and who knows, a few years from now the market will be a completely different beast. I speak from experience here. Cards I knew to be way too expensive then are affordable now. Cards I own and know were cheap back when I bought them are hauntingly unaffordable for me today. If I lost Karn, I wouldn't be able to replace that deck. Another reason card prices will spike is when it becomes common knowledge that certain cards win games for a particular deck, and you can bet the Magic market will notice. It can work the other way too though. When coin flip was an impractical joke mechanic, I bought Krark's Thumb for $1 or $2. Now it's $24, and I apologize that that's how it shakes out, because I love Zndrsplt no Kaun, and that card is integral to help that deck win the game. But it's not worth $20, and that price is prohibitive for people looking to play what's ostensibly a silly, chaotic game plan. You're flipping coins. With the introduction of secret lairs, many players have cried foul of wizards overcharging for cards and preying on fear of missing out. And it's true, but also this is how the secondary market works too. You may get a new commander that suddenly cares about a weird forgotten mechanic, and those old cards will spike overnight. It feels bad to know you're 3 years too late to play a deck you like with its proper toolkit because stock traders for a card game decided there was money in it. Rest in peace to all the prospective new Karn Silver Golem decks that won't be built for reasons like this. Anyways, I'm done talking about the money and market stuff. All I mean to express here is that to avoid excessive spending guilt, you shouldn't need a side interest in economics to get into a card game. By design, it's definitely gotten noticeably harder in just the short years since I started playing to get certain cards. It's not all bad though, and most of the commanders I own are still mercifully less than $5 to buy and start building around. So, I know I just said it sucks that he's a $45 commander these days, but I really want to talk about Karn and Mirrorworks. I love Karn's story enough that I have a mini binder that tells it. He was created on the plane of Dominaria while it was under imminent threat of invasion by a hellish race of machine jerks known as the Phyrexians. Picture H.R. Giger biomechanical horrors and Hellraiser Cenobites rolled into one. The Golem's creators, Urza and Baron, made him Terminator style to go back and prevent the Phyrexians from existing, but the experiment failed. Nonetheless, Karn survived, and he would seek purpose elsewhere, assisting in other projects and adventures led by Urza, who for the record is the superhuman planeswalker wizard artificer god of early Magic lore, but also the biggest jerk by the same coin. I don't know, dude was dealing with a lot. He's still a jerk though. Granted sentience by an artifact known as a Heartstone, Karn developed emotions and personality. Urza passed the then nameless golem off to a young student at the Tolarian Academy named Teferi, who treated the golem like a toy, teasing and mocking him relentlessly, and giving him the nickname Artie Shovelhead, the Book of Artie Shovelhead. I love that nickname, but it's also super mean. A senior student named Joyra saw Teferi's mistreatment and took the golem away to properly teach him about the world. She granted him a proper name, the Thran word Karn, meaning mighty. Joyra would become Karn's first and closest friend. Time passed, and Urza's battle against the Phyrexians raged on. He would amass a collection of artifacts dubbed the Legacy, which he hoped would be capable of defeating the Phyrexian threat for good. Urza also manipulated Dominarian bloodlines to create the perfect hero to wield the Legacy in the form of Gerard Capuchin, because, you know, that's a thing you do, and entrusted Gerard and the Legacy's protection to Karn. The Legacy would be stolen by a Phyrexian named Volrath during the Weatherlight Saga, and Karn was tricked into causing the death of an innocent bystander while trying to retrieve it, which would lead to him taking a vow of pacifism to prevent himself from making the same mistake ever again. While he does eventually renounce the vow in favor of fighting to save those he cares about, Karn's Silver Golem reflects his pacifistic tendency by turning from a 4/4 to a 0/8 whenever he enters combat to attack or block. He's a gentle giant and a protector at heart, and the mechanic reflects this aspect of his storyline. At the culmination of the Phyrexian invasion, Yawgmoth, Lord of the Wastes, Father of Machines, and Master of Phyrexia, manifests on Dominaria. All seems lost, but Karn is able to unite the Legacy weapon, channeling it into a massive blast that exiles Yawgmoth and simultaneously ignites Karn's latent Planeswalker spark, making Karn the first artificial being to become a Planeswalker. Urza and Gerard are lost in the blast, but their destiny is at last fulfilled. Phyrexia has been stopped, seemingly for good. After so many hardships, Karn bid farewell to Dominaria and his remaining friends, leaving in search of a new purpose on a new plane. It's at this point that he came upon an empty plane, and went about constructing a mathematically perfect world called Argentum. From here, he monitored Dominaria and other worlds using probes, one of which became a cursed artifact called the Mirari, which after setting its own series of disastrous events in motion, Karn retrieved and brought to life on Argentum as a new being named Memnarch. Karn granted him the responsibility of maintaining the plane while Karn wandered other planes with his companions. Frankly, this was a really bad move. In a cruel twist of fate, the battle against Phyrexia had left traces of glistening oil on Karn's body, and this oil seeped into Argentum and likely other planes. Memnarch himself came into contact with the oil immediately after Karn's departure and quickly went mad from it, renaming the plane Mirrodin and engineering a method to send his own probes to other planes, spiriting away myriad life forms to become the new inhabitants of his plane, ultimately aiming to cultivate a latent planeswalker's spark, then somehow transmute it to his own body to become as powerful as his creator. A group of Mirran heroes were able to defeat Memnarch, but the plane itself was already under influence of a deeper evil by way of the festering Phyrexian corruption. Mirrodin would face its own Phyrexian invasion from within, and become hopelessly overwhelmed by it. New Phyrexia was born. These new Phyrexians would corrupt and trap Karn in his own warped plane upon his return, and 5 Praetors took dominion of each region and its respective color of mana, each squabbling with the others for their own ideal vision of completion, through which living sentient tissue is replaced with cold, assimilated metal. A planeswalker named Venser traveled to the plane and gave his life to rescue Karn and restore his corrupted spark, but Mirrodin was beyond saving by then. The surviving Planeswalkers had to abandon the Mirren resistance to their fate, and to this day, New Phyrexia schemes to once again launch invasions through the multiverse and spread their corruption to other planes. As of now, Karn has recently returned to the story, resolute to find a way to destroy New Phyrexia before they may doom another plane. It may not be long either, as we've seen Vorinclex, Praetor of Green Mana, in the plane of Kaldheim very recently. Karn is a being who has endured much across Magic's history. From his creation in Urza's Saga in 1998, technically Vanguard in 1997, but semantics, appearing in 2000's Invasion set storyline pitted against the Phyrexians, through to the dire struggle of 2011's New Phyrexia, and returning in 2018's Dominaria and 2019's War of the Spark. He has seen friends and allies fall to terrible evils, but through this has remained resolute, committed to fighting for good. Karn is a protector, a shaper of life, and a brave old hero with one of the most long-running stories in Magic lore. When I took interest in the artifacts through Magic history, coincidentally looking for equipment for Oketra to wield, I discovered the fascinating artifice of Mirrodin, and through it, Karn himself. Since I started playing, my hope has been to see the day Karn is able to defeat New Phyrexia and stop the Praetors once and for all. The Mirrodin and Scars of Mirrodin blocks were historically panned for some overpowered cards and mechanics that warped formats and led to several bans. But for my salt, I think they're really cool sets if you want some robots with your wizards. I won't say there's nothing like them because we have had the Artifact Matters plane Kaladesh, and we also have the upcoming Cyberpunk Neon Dynasty, and I'm super excited about that, but man, there's just something about the high fantasy blend and biomechanical technology of Mirrodin that I loved. And maybe I'm biased because my favorite character also made the plane. You can read books about Mirrodin, it's cool, and they're not the best books, but I like them. They're books I would have read in high school and loved them. In terms of gameplay, Karn's Silver Golem is limited to colorless mana, meaning he's stuck on the outskirts of the color pie, where artifacts do a little bit of everything, just not as well as color-specific effects. Despite the fragility of artifacts being one of the most widely removable card types no matter what your opponents run, Karn is able to make up for it all by playing those artifacts like nobody else. With his 1-mana ability, you can turn non-creature artifacts into creatures, improvising defenders on the go, and simultaneously creating new ways in which artifacts were never intended to be used. A Basalt Monolith that taps for 3 mana when made into a creature can be untapped for 2 mana by Voltaic Construct, back and forth forever to make infinite mana, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Karn changes how you view an entire card type, and opens up some super creative strategies unique to him. At its best, this is the kind of thing I love about Commander. It can get you to look at the game from a whole new point of view, make an odd fringe strategy suddenly completely viable. So one more time, I'm sorry that Karn is a $45 card. You absolutely shouldn't have to pay that much just to start building a deck. Karn is good, but he's certainly not so powerful that he needs a price tag like that on him. And hey, if he ever, by some chance, does become affordable again, I'll give you my favorite pet combo. You need 2 of the 4 Mirrodin station cycle, Grinding Station and Salvaging Station. You need a Soul Ring and Karn on the board. First, you'll tap the Soul Ring to make 2 mana. Next, use Karn's ability to make it a 1/1 creature. Take that creature and sack it to the Grinding Station. Target opponent mills 3 cards, the ring goes to the graveyard and becomes a non-creature artifact again. Now tap Salvaging Station to return the 1-cost Soul Ring to play. As the artifact Soul Ring hits the battlefield again, untap Grinding Station, then tap the Soul Ring for another 2 mana. Make it into a creature, sack it to the Grinding Station, and since Salvaging Station sees a creature hit the graveyard, it untaps and lets us grab the returned non-creature artifact Soul Ring once again. Repeat ad infinitum until your opponent's libraries have been emptied into their graveyards. End your turn, and on their draw steps, your opponents will drop like dominoes. Their spellbooks emptied by a very traumatized Soul Ring. If someone can restore their graveyards to their library, like through Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, you can always pack a spare Goblin Cannon or Rocket Launcher and use the extra infinite colorless mana you've been netting to blast them for lethal damage to the face. Now that's a real Karn combo. Admittedly, I'm not sure which came first between my Karn and Saproling deck. They began around the same time. Saprolings were another old card type that didn't have much support at the time I built them. I used Namada, Grove Guardian, as my commander originally, and they certainly weren't going to blow anyone away compared to the rampant support that elf and zombie tribal decks enjoyed. I just liked mushrooms, and a fungus deck was what I wanted, so I made one, keeping to one color since that was all I felt I could handle back then. Otherwise, I'd have run Thulin of Havenwood or Gave Guru of Spores. Verdaloth the Ancient was an option too, but 6 mana and kicker is a little too rich for any format, even if you are playing mono green. Then Dominaria was announced, and with it, not only Karn's return to the storyline, but Slimefoot the Stowaway as a new Saproling commander. Dominaria was basically my Magic equivalent of getting your birthday and Christmas morning on the same day. I was hesitant to make that jump to a 2-color deck, but Slimefoot was such a mad thallid of a Saproling commander that I resolved to splash black and finally figure out how to run the land base. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made for the deck. Slimefoot made Saprolings real contenders, from weird, stoic, kind of wimpy fungi to a rotating crop of value and damage, making Saprolings as quickly as it sacrificed them to keep the engine going. This is how I learned about aristocrat decks, and how a few vampires became very confused that they were in a mushroom tribal deck instead of their usual stomping grounds. Even better, my commanders hung out with each other in the Dominaria storyline. Slimefoot, no joke, hangs out with Karn on the top deck of the rebuilt Weatherlight skyship, and Karn talks to him about the mission plan to stop the Demon Lord Belzenlock. But Slimefoot can't speak, so he's just nodding and shrugging and giving thumbs up. I love him, he's adorable. My commanders are buddies in the lore, and it's great.
You are my best friend. My best friend.
Dominaria may be the runner-up for me in terms of flavor, function, and fun. I didn't get to experience Mirrodin firsthand, but I played plenty of Dominaria during pre-release, and never felt more directly engaged in the game than in those days. Slimefoot later in the story saves the day by talking to lost spirits of nature in the land of Urborg, which manifest into Muldrotha, the Gravetide, who helps fight off a giant evil frog spirit named Yargle. Yes, for real. Magic lore is dumb, and I love it. With 3 decks under my belt, I thought I was done with deck building, happy with my play options. Then Battle Bond dropped, and I couldn't resist 2 partner commanders sharing the command zone together, Zyndersplit and Okaon, who I've already mentioned twice before. Centered around coin flipping, an archetype I had bought a few cheap cards from as a novelty that such a mechanic ever existed, the deck list I made was fairly inexpensive, and the deck almost immediately saw some crazy plays in my experience with it. I think this was how I came to love Izzet, pairing red and blue together to create this weird, chaotic, and experimental deck that was effectively a joke, except the fact that it actually worked. I'm telling you, Magic was designed to be broken, and decks like this are living proof. I'll always have a soft spot for my Homunculus and Cyclops tag team, but I only bring them out on occasion. You kinda have to read the room before you pull out a coin flipping deck. Not too much more to say about it, but Battle Bond was a great little set that I feel faded into obscurity pretty soon after it launched. Even the card packs disappeared from most game store shelves, and it's a shame because I had a lot of fun with it. Shockingly, I think people must have enjoyed this deck, at least a little bit, because they've managed to sneak a coin flip card or two into the occasional set since Zyndersplit and Okaon were printed. For that, all I can say is thanks to whoever on the design team keeps managing to get those coin flippers through to print. Also, for anyone who's played the new Dungeons & Dragons set, D20 rolling is now the new coin flipping, and I'm all here for it. Rewind a couple months before Dominaria and Battle Bond, back when I was still early in my deck building days. One of my favorite cards to explore and collect were from 2 sets much earlier in Magic's history. 1998's Unglued and 2004's Unhinged brought silver-bordered cards to the game. Explicitly silly cards, never meant for normal play, or at least that was what they said at the time. The truth is, while the mechanics often bordered on ridiculousness, unsets were historically a place to push the possibilities of Magic, and test new ways to play the game before bringing those designs to fruition in later black-bordered sets. Big Furry Monster was a card so big he took up 2 Magic cards worth of real estate. Ridiculous as he was, this idea would be revisited in the set Eldritch Moon, albeit only in 3 pairs of cards. By playing both together, you could meld them, flipping both cards to create a new, fearsome creature on the back. Though sparingly used, I loved the idea of it, and finding its origins in the joke sets of old that I liked so much was icing on the cake. When I learned that we'd be ending 2017 with a return to the unsets after a long absence due to poor sales for the originals, I was surprised and delighted. All the old stuff I loved about the game just kept coming down the line fresh and new, all while I got to explore the things I had missed previously. Unstable was very hit or miss with my LGS, but I was all in on it. I have a card box full of silver-bordered cards, if that's any indication, and I still remember vividly stories where I turned around seemingly lost games with cards like Handy Dandy Clone Machine, using fellow players as my homunculus tokens, playing a late-game Hangman with the secret word, Hangman, and playing as Summon the Pack, facing down a board of creatures that were about to kill me, buying a Journey into Nyx pack at a friend's recommendation, and pulling 6 creatures out of it that immediately hit the board for free. I think Unstable pre-release was the best I ever performed in sealed Magic events, which probably says a lot about me. The great roundabout connection of all these cards is that the first D20 card printed came from Unstable, in the form of the Sword of Dungeons and Dragons, parroting a sword cycle from Mirrorworks blocks. And now we have real D&D sets in Magic with D20 Matters cards. Everything's connected, man. I'm telling ya. I love it. And that was it, right? That's enough Magic for anybody, I'd think. But you know, when I thought I was done, they got me back in with Commander 2018. Every year, we'd get a set of 4 pre-constructed decks with a few new commanders to play with or add to existing decks. At this point, I was coming up on my last year of college and had built a 3D printer for my senior project, which I had settled on teaching myself some of the ins and outs of digital fabrication, taking models I had made in Maya and making them into physical objects, little statues basically, nothing that complex. It was a cool project to wrap my head around. At the same time, I bought the Exquisite Invention pre-con, not for that year's Planeswalkers as Commanders theme, though Saheeli the Gifted was a cool marquee card, but I had my eyes set on one of the deck's other legendary creatures, Bruticlad Telkor Engineer, a time-shifted Phyrexian quoted on Sarcomite Mirror from Future Sight. The Mirror were my favorite creature type from Mirrodin, small humanoid robots with bird-like beaks who skittered about the metal plane, observing its life forms as unassuming spies for Memnarch. But only a few of their ranks were worth running in a commander deck, and there were no legendary creatures among them to craft a deck from. So even my Karn deck ultimately didn't recruit many to its cause. Bruticlad let me play the Mirror commander I always wanted, still only running a select few, but that deck ended up being a sort of culmination of every lesson I had learned about Magic up to that point with my previous decks, and a clever little analog to my real-life senior project. A commander deck that 3D printed its forces into an army of powerful copies. Bruticlad works like this. Your tokens have haste, and before combat, Bruty makes a 2/1 Mirror Artifact creature token. Then allows you to turn all your tokens into copies of a single token you control, fabricating life into new forms. Bruticlad might be my favorite explanation of Phyrexian completion, where he's able to take many different resources and efficiently assimilate them into a single type. Bruticlad begged to be built around efficient token generators, a lesson I took in earnest from Slimefoot's Gardens of Saprolings. This mechanic made for all sorts of fun possibilities using Quasi-Duplicate, Cackling Counterpart, Fated Infatuation, and more to make token copies of big creatures. My ideas started simply on the goal of making a bunch of big hitters, an army of Darksteel Colossi, but I wasn't satisfied to stop there. Karn's clever bending of the rules urged me to go further. Why not maximize value by copying one creature with a triggered ability into a whole army all going off at once? Maybe I could take a Power Stone shard, copy it with Mirrorworks, then fill my board with Power Stone shards, each creating colorless mana equal to the total amount of Power Stone shards. Combat Celebrant and Time Stream Navigator with City's Blessing can make infinite combats or infinite turns respectively, making more tokens to exert or tuck into your library to keep the engine going indefinitely. Magic philosophy emanates through its colors and player identities. All of this can help you form a story to help better understand yourself. I became interested in cultivating life in green. I got to enjoy plenty of laughs, not just from the trio of unsets and one-eyed coin-flipping shenanigans, but from spending good quality time with new friends made through this mutual hobby. I saw how Magic mirrored aspects of my own life through Brutticlad's odd experiments in red and blue, and more recently crafted my first 3-color deck with the Mimeoplasm, using the best parts of different creatures to craft the perfect being as my commander. Lately I've been diving back into the lore of Mirrodin, looking forward to our inevitable return to stop New Phyrexia. Moving to my end step, I encourage you, if you love to build, to create, even just to ponder over the possibilities of a game, and push it to its limits and beyond. Try Magic the Gathering. If you want to meet people, or get closer with your existing friends, buy a deck or two. See if you enjoy the game. Magic is quality time, it's creative expression, it's a turn where someone makes 1,000 Thopters only to get board wiped. Or sometimes it's playing a joke card that lets you high-five other players to gain life. The possible experiences are so vast, your journey through Magic the Gathering is bound to be a unique one. I hope if you do try it out, that you're able to find your own cards that are special to you. I hope the market shenanigans fade off a little and you can enjoy the same cards I did when I was getting into the whole thing. And if not, I hope you find your own new cards that are even cooler than my old weird jank. And so when new people get into the game 5 years from now, you can tell them how you bought those cards back before they were $45. In the end, we're all Planeswalkers, and within our minds we hold infinite and powerful possibilities. That's why I say Magic the Gathering is truly a game for the mushrooms, the lizards, robots, and the wizards. Thanks everyone. Pass turn. Your go. This Kipple Eye is brought to you by months of writer's block. I'm really sorry it took so long for me to get this one out. There was just so much revising and rewriting the script until it sounded right, and I still don't know if it did, but I just needed to get it out. This is a game that I really love, and I wanted to try something different. I guess that's really just been the theme, is I want to do something a little different with each one of these, and thank you guys so much for your support, both when I was making videos more actively and now that I've kind of had my first hiatus since starting. I do want to keep doing stuff. Honestly, I'm not worried about this becoming a big channel or anything. I just want these to be fun little video essays for anybody out there listening. I hope that you like these videos, that you get something out of these. The whole reason I'm doing these is because that's what it is for me. I don't know. Who knows when the next video is going to be out or what it's even going to be on. I have a couple ideas kicking around, but we'll see how it goes. If you like this video and you feel like supporting what I'm doing, I do have a Ko-fi page. I do have a Patreon. I shut it down for a month or so while I was working on this because it had been a while and I didn't want to be taking money from people and not giving something back, so that'll probably be back up, at least for a little while. However you want to support me, I'm super flattered, and yeah, let me know your Magic stories. If you haven't played Magic the Gathering, look through some cards and tell me the deck you want to build. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching. I will see you all later. Bye-bye.